Alanna, I've got a question for you,
Okay.
as I often like to begin these episodes with questions. Have you ever wanted to do something and you just felt like you couldn't for some reason?
Yeah. A lot.
What? Have you ever known that you could be doing things towards, like taking actions towards a goal, um, but you found yourself not doing those things?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, have you ever described that type of procrastination or that feeling as being stuck or feeling stuck?
100%. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, by the way, hi everyone, No Excuses podcast, coaching podcast. I think a lot of people have had that experience. Not I think, I know a lot of people have had that experience where the metaphor that they choose to attach to their experience of procrastination or not taking action is one of being stuck, feeling stuck, or some sort of stuckness. I think this metaphor for the challenge of whatever it is it's describing, procrastination or not getting things done or not making progress, this metaphor has become nearly prolific. I'm stuck. I'm blocked. There's a stuckness. I can't move. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of emphasizing that it's a metaphor because it's not literally true, right? If you think back to all the times you've been having this feeling of stuckness, probably, Alanna, you were never literally glued to the floor or literally stuck to a wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, obviously you're not stuck, but it is a limitation that you're subscribing to, right? When you're feeling stuck, when you're saying that, it's easy to stay limited when you're in that vibe.
Yeah. It is easy to stay in that vibe when you're in that vibe.
hmm
So, listeners, if any of what we just talked about resonates with you, or you felt stuck in your life, or maybe you feel stuck in one area right now, stay tuned because we're going to take this apart. We're going to dismantle it, and we're going to find out what is the recipe to become unstuck, to dissolve this so-called stuckness, so that we can take massive action. Does that sound good, Alanna?
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it. This topic is, I love this topic because it's something that a lot of my clients come to me talking about, right? Like they feel stuck. And what I like to say when someone says to me that they're feeling stuck, or if I'm feeling stuck, that is a huge message to me that my head and my heart are out of alignment. Like there's something that my head thinks I should be doing, or, I'm not getting what I should have, or something like that. And, my heart really wants to be somewhere else or doing something else, or like they're off balance. And I
That's
find that that makes you feel stuck, right? Because you're in a stalemate between what your heart really wants to do and what your head logically is saying, well, you should be doing this because you're this age or you're this, you know, job or whatever, right?
Okay, so that's a good point. So, okay, so there's number one thing that causes people to feel this feeling of stuckness, right? Where they're out of alignment. Their conscious goals are not in alignment with their unconscious or subconscious programming, right? Their
Yeah.
conscious goals are this level of freedom and success, but their subconscious programming is probably a whole bunch of shoulds. You should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And that incongruence, I agree with you, can create that feeling that people describe as stuckness, right?
hmm
Um, yeah, I think that's a big one. I think that's a
Yeah.
big, big, big one, right? And that's one that like hypnotists, hypnotherapists, and coaches help people overcome a lot because it's sometimes that's the thing,
hmm
that being out of alignment that prevents people from taking action, right? That creates the feeling or
Yeah.
enables the possibility for the feeling of stuckness, right?
Yeah. So, like, sometimes it's just that awareness that is the breakthrough, right? And
Yeah.
then you're just like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And one of the questions that you can get there with is, what do you want? Like when you actually sit down with someone and you say, oh, you're feeling stuck. Okay. So what do you want? And they're
Yeah.
just like, they know what they want. Everyone knows what they want, but it's that incongruence, right?
Yeah.
That keeps you from having what you want.
Yeah. Do we have a specific example? I have many, but do you have one?
um,
Maybe from a client or a former client or even from your own life?
yeah. Well, let's use the podcast as an example. You know, I had the idea to start a podcast, and I wanted to ask you to do it together. And I was afraid of getting rejected, for example, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think this is very common. Like you could probably use this as a metaphor for any other area of your life, right? But I wanted to do the podcast and I wanted to ask you if you wanted to do it together, but I wasn't sure, right? And so um but I listened to my intuition because I had created a self-image of me being the person that goes with her intuition and, you know, and takes action as a result. So, I'd already kind of up leveled my self-image to be someone who is like, well, when I get these ideas, I'm going to ask, and who cares if I get rejected, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an example of like where you could feel stuck, because I could have sat with that idea for months and not moved and not created the podcast and not, got to where we are now, um, and just kind of spun my wheels, kind of obsessing or, overthinking or wondering, should I go ahead with this? Should I not? I don't know. You know, even I even think back to when I was working in PR, when I was thinking like I wanted to start my own business. Um, but I was like, should I quit? I don't have a safety net. Like I'm going on mat leave. Like, what do I do? But then I just took the action, right? Like I created a budget. We figured out like, could we afford that? All the things. And then it happened. But I was in that stalemate position for a long time,
Yeah.
like 7 years. So,
Yeah. Um, all right, cool. That's a couple of good examples there. Okay, so we've illustrated that inconsistency or incongruity between conscious desires and unconscious programming or subconscious limiting beliefs, whatever it is. The next big one that I think creates the stuckness or allows the feeling of stuckness to exist is overwhelm.
yeah.
People feel overwhelmed. They want to accomplish something, but it's a large undertaking, right? It has many parts or steps or will be time consuming. And it feels like too much to even get started. I think when people, feel that sort of overwhelm, there's too much, then it's easier to stay in the stuckness and not take action. At least it seems easier to stay in the stuckness and not take action than to start taking action. Um, and I think that's really common,
Yeah.
right? That's really common.
Yeah, like I like to think of that as like being busy. Like people love to just be busy all the time, and that's their program. Like they're just in that constant state of overwhelm and busy and oh, I've got to get these things done and everything, but really in that kind of program, you're just really spinning your wheels because you're not getting anywhere. And I
Yeah.
think when you're in overwhelm, you lack goals because you kind of don't really know where you're going. You're just doing, and you lack a bit of direction. And so, how do you overcome that overwhelm? Well, you figure out what you want, and um, you start moving towards that goal.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Um, yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly what it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to move past all these, but I just want to lay
Yeah.
them out first because there's three that I think I have in mind, and we touched on two of them.
Hmm.
First one, as a recap, incongruence and programming. The second one was overwhelm, And the third one that I have in mind, I'm curious if there's, we'll lay out this third one, and then I don't know if there's going to be any others that come up in your mind.
Okay.
But the third one I think is a little bit connected to the first one, and it's secondary gain, as we call it, to use a technical term, or emotional benefit. And what that means is it's more comfortable, or it's your subconscious mind's sneaky way of protecting you, to make you feel so stuck that you can't take action, right? So for example, somebody really wants to be in a relationship, but they never go on dates, they never go out, they never socialize, they never put themselves in a position where they would meet a potential partner because they feel stuck. Well, the secondary gain, or the emotional benefit that they might not realize is being created, is safety from rejection.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has, as I think most people do, if somebody has a strong fear of rejection, that might be, and often will be, more powerful than the towards goal of finding a partner, right?
Yeah.
And so the way that manifests, it's not like your subconscious mind sends you a little note that says you're afraid of rejection, therefore you're not going to have the energy to go out and date. No. It's much more subtle than that. You just feel stuck and you don't take action, right? Thoughts on that one?
Yeah. And then, you can just kind of suffer in your own fear, thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of going out. I'm not, I have more fun by myself. Right. Like, I think you kind of, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that's what they call it, or you call it, right? Where you just are like, um, even though I don't know if you consciously know that you're afraid of rejection. I think you do, but I think that you're just like, oh, I'm better, but you maybe mask it with like, oh, I'm better off, not putting myself out there because I feel safe in, where I'm at. You could like
Yeah.
apply that to like starting a business too, where you're just like, oh, I'm better off just staying at my job because I have a secure, paycheck every month. Um, I have the routine, I have the schedule. I don't have to like make decisions or really think about a lot of things. So, I mean, it's the same: relationships, work, your health, your physical fitness. You know what I mean? Like it all happens. Um, that secondary gain likes to keep you stuck.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So we've laid those three out. Those I think are the big ones that create the feeling of stuckness.
yeah.
And then a
I would
couple, yeah, go ahead. And then I have a couple.
I would also like to add in, there's also these self images, and we kind of touched on that a little bit, but this self image of um, that perpetuates that I'm stuck feeling as well. So if you are someone who is, who maybe is a lonely person or who likes to spend a lot of time by themselves, if you're someone who um, feels like they're not good enough, like they're not worthy, or everyone else is better than you, then that's also going to keep you stuck because you're already kind of mired in this image of yourself that is not worthy of putting yourself out there or trying something new or going after what you want. So it's just easier for you to stay stuck, like we were saying before, because it's more comfortable. Like that's your comfort zone, actually, is that feeling of stuck. And actually moving and getting out of that stuck place is new and uncomfortable and scary, and like it's a huge leap of faith. And I think that's where a lot of self-image work comes in, right? Where you have to start changing what you're telling yourself and how you're speaking to yourself and how you view yourself so that you can get out of the
Yeah.
quicksand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another good one. And that one, the self-image, that one's connected to all three of the ones that we discussed earlier, but very specifically connected to the incongruence one, which is number one, and the emotional benefits or secondary gain, which is number
Yeah.
three.
Well, I think
But
it's too like you're not trusting yourself, right? Because if we go back to that first one where you're out of alignment from your head to your heart, that means you don't trust yourself. You don't trust the decisions you're making. You don't trust the ideas that you have. You're not listening to your intuition.
yeah, yeah, um,
And that's
yeah,
not woo woo, right? Like a lot of people might listen to this and hear, oh, whatever, my head and heart are out of alignment. Like, what the heck does that mean? I get it. But really, it's like when your head wants to do something and your heart, like your guts, want to do
yeah,
something else. Like, a lot of people are so disconnected from their gut instinct
yeah,
because they've never trusted it from their childhood, right? Like, we're going back to that's the programming. And
yeah,
so the biggest shift for me in my life was when I shut that part of my brain down and said, no, we're not doing logic anymore. We're not only listening to the head. You've got to start listening to your heart, your gut, whatever, your intuition, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
Because that part of you knows the answers. Like you have all the answers. And I mean, if you go back to episode 1, we have a whole episode on your intuition. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that because I could just go on about that forever.
yes. Yeah, or as you famously said last season, all you have to do is drop from your head down. I can't remember the full quote. It was very
Yeah, all you
it
have to
was
do is
very
drop down
compelling.
from your head into your heart, into your knowing,
It's
and
your
then
knowing,
everything
yes.
will
Right. And
open.
then the floodgates of money just open right up. We joke, but it's actually kind of true. Okay, or very true. All right. Couple of little ones.
Okay.
A couple of little sneaky ones that create stuckness or enable stuckness to occur. And I always remind people of this when they're talking to me about being stuck or being overwhelmed. And the thing is that we could go deeper on this because if this, and I'm going to name them and they're going to seem super obvious, and it's common sense, but it's stuff that many high achievers, high performers, they fall into the trap of forgetting about these simple things, which could be a symptom of other, programming or incongruence or whatever, but we may as well just address them directly. If you're not taking care of your sleep, your nutrition, and your hydration, you're like 1,000 times more likely to experience this feeling of stuckness
Yeah.
that people describe. If you're not sleeping consistent hours and for long enough, if you're not eating well and consistently and predictably, and if you're not always well hydrated, if any one of these or multiple of these are not happening, in my experience, in my opinion, and in my training, your likelihood of feeling stuck when you otherwise would not feel stuck is super high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we weren't recording for a second, but we're recording.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Oh, good. Because I don't do overs, Alanna Banks.
I know.
You would have had to go back and play both roles and just from memory. We are recording. Anyways,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I'm with you
super
on
important.
that. Yeah, so important. That's the first check, I would say. If you're feeling frazzled, overwhelmed, like stressed to the max, like ask yourself, did I eat today?
Yeah,
Right? Did I have a
yeah,
good sleep last night?
yeah,
Because yeah, those can just send you on a downward spiral
yeah.
for sure.
Actually, okay, I've got a little sidebar,
Yeah.
a little self-check. I think I've taught this to you in courses that you've been in before. But my standard protocol, if somebody's feeling like emotionally unwell or stuck or overwhelmed or whatever, is to teach them the DHALT protocol, which is D-HALT, which is D stands for dehydrated. Are you dehydrated? Have you been? And when we're going through the DHALT protocol, I always advise people to think back over the last 72 hours, not the last 3 hours, as most people tend to do, the last 72 hours. So ask yourself, are you dehydrated? Have you been hydrating yourself well and normally for the last 3 days? Because if 2 days ago you had no water whatsoever and the last 2 days you've been drinking water normally, you could be still feeling residual effects of dehydration, right, that you haven't recovered from yet, right? So we're always thinking 3 days. H stands for hungry. Have over the past 3 days you eaten normally, consistently, and nothing like way out of the ordinary for you, right? I'm going to bang these off quickly. A stands for angry. Is there something that's troubling you that you're choosing to ignore rather than deal with, right? Because that just creates an open loop, and negative emotions running in the background can be burdensome. L stands for lonely or tired. Are you lonely or tired? Have you been lacking in human connection or rest in the last 72 hours? Sorry, lonely or bored. Lonely or bored. Yeah. L stands for lonely or bored, meaning unstimulated, either via connection or whatever stimulus. And the T, is tired. Have you been unrested or not well rested? Anyways, so if any of those are out of whack, it's almost not even worth addressing like limiting beliefs or like incongruency or how a person manages overwhelm, because it's going to make it so much easier, or the problem may just disappear when those are addressed. So, and I think this is a good segue into what do we do about these things. So let's go through our tips, and we can go through the 3 kind of causes of stuckness that we addressed in the first half of the episode, and maybe discuss one by one how to address them. The nice thing about working in an office is that there's people that walk by my glass wall out there, from other offices. Anyways, number 1 was incongruence between conscious goals, conscious desires, and unconscious programming. So Alanna, what do we, you're the hypnotist. What do we do about that?
Well, when you're feeling incongruent, you need to stop, and just ask yourself, what do I want? You need to listen to yourself, listen to your intuition. So what I would recommend is just sit and be quiet. I think many people spend so much time being busy and frazzled and doing and, trying to figure things out and forcing it and all the things. You just need to surrender. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's very difficult if you're the type of person who's always going, doing the things. You really just need to take a chill pill. So go and sit with nothing. And a lot of times I have clients that will come to me feeling overwhelmed, and one of my taskings for them is to sit in a room with nothing for 1 hour. No music, no pen, paper, no food, no water, nothing. Just sit, and you're not allowed to lie down. That's the other rule that I give them, because you'll fall asleep. So you just need to sit for 1 hour. And it's very, very interesting to see what comes up. And I've done this too. I don't just assign this because I want to torture you. I've done this, and it was very eye-opening for me, because the interesting thing is you're going to delay. You're going to delay. So if I were to say to you, okay, Ryan, before we record next week's episode, I want you to take 1 hour and just sit by yourself, nothing, and then report the results next week, right? If you're the type of person who's wants to be busy all the time, you're going to probably delay that. And there's a lot of awareness in the delaying of going and doing that tasking. What's coming up for you? Why don't you want to go and do that? What are you afraid of? Why don't you want to sit by yourself? Are you think you're going to do it wrong? Do you think you're going to be bored? Do you think nothing's going to come of it? Do you think it's silly? There's so much awareness that comes from even the preamble to getting there. It's so cool. I love it. And then once you are there, there's so much stuff that comes up for you. And then when you're done, you can go and write it all out. And that's important too. I was having a conversation with someone this morning about this, where they were just I'm not able to sleep. I'm waking up at 3 a.m, and I'm just kind of going over all these things. And I was honestly, what I do in those situations is I get up and I just write it out. You got to get it out. Because when it's just in your mind, it's just going to roll around, and and it just becomes this like loop, right? Like this infinite loop of like, well, this and that, and you can't figure it out. But once you spit it out onto a piece of paper, then it starts to make sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of
Uh,
like a long, a long answer to that question.
Long, very specific one thing. Yeah. No, and that's actually a good exercise, right?
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is, in my opinion, what's going to happen is if a person removes stimulus and basically creates empty space, first their conscious mind is going to chatter a lot, but eventually, when it's that long, it's an hour, more thoughts are going to have the opportunity to come up, more ideas, more realizations, more understandings. And it'll be interesting to see what comes up, especially if a person goes into that hour with the intent of understanding a specific pattern, or the intent of understanding, like, for example, stuckness. Like
Hmm.
if they go in to this 1 hour of silence and free of stimulation with the intent of, just being open to what realizations they might have about stuckness, something's going to come up.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of
100%.
like, when you're out for a jog, or you're standing in the shower, and there's literally, you don't have the opportunity to be distracted by smartphones or television or conversation with other people. Finally, there's a space that's created where your unconscious mind can let spill some information that you may not normally have in your conscious awareness. So that's a good
Yeah.
tip. That's a good
Yeah.
exercise
I mean, yeah,
uh,
that's like a really
for people to
specific one,
do.
but the other one really is just like relax. Go watch a
Yeah,
movie, go
relax.
read,
Stop.
go, or maybe not read, but like go and do something that is fun. Like go have
Yeah,
fun, right? Like that's another assignment
yeah,
because oftentimes if you're in that like overwhelmed space, or no, we're not talking about overwhelm. We're talking about like that intuition. You're going against it.
incongruence. Yeah.
But I guess let's move into the overwhelm. Um, Go and have fun. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just drop everything, close the door, and go do something that brings you joy. Or go take a nap, or, play with your kids, or, go for a drive, go do something else and get your mind off of it. And then chances are the overwhelm will dissipate and you may solve a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Um, yeah. I think if the overwhelm is connected to what feels like an insurmountable problem, taking a break, taking a step back, or doing something that brings you joy will be very, very, very useful.
Yeah.
Um, I think if the overwhelm that's causing the stuckness is connected more so to just like what seems like an insurmountable number of tasks or workload. Like if it's not necessarily a specific problem that hasn't been solved, it's just like the overwhelm of too much to do.
Mm,
Um, Stepping away from it may or may not be highly effective unless you've first consciously made an effort to chunk down. So
yeah.
the remedy from the NLP world would be, if a person's experiencing overwhelm, the very first thing we suspect is that they're just thinking at a high chunk level, right? It's like that funny meme where it's like, how do you draw an owl? And it's like, you draw the outline, and then the next one, the owl is just completely illustrated in fine detail. Well, no, there's like way more steps in between. So like, how do I start a business? It's not like, okay, today I have no business and tomorrow I have a 6-figure coaching business. It's like, okay, today I have no business. Tomorrow I'm going to start an Instagram page and a Facebook page. The day after that, I'm going to research training. The day after that, I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So, the NLP official remedy and my official remedy for overwhelm specifically is break things down into baby steps, right?
Yeah.
And then don't even consider steps 2 through 99. Just look at step 1 and ask yourself, how can I do this now today? And if
Hmm.
the answer is I can't, then break step 1 down into step 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E until it's tiny enough that it feels easy,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
two good solutions there, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and the
Sorry, go ahead.
question you could ask yourself to kind of get there to chunk down is like, what's preventing me from doing this task, right? Or this thing. Um, and then ask yourself, like, why is that a problem? And then, that's how you can kind of move through. It's a lot easier when you're doing it with someone who's coaching you.
Yeah.
FYI, call me.
Hear
um,
that, listeners? Um, cool. All right. All right. So we got to be mindful of time. So
yes.
we got one more to discuss. And that is emotional benefit and secondary gain.
Right.
So this is where your subconscious mind is attempting to protect you by keeping you in your comfort zone, when this may actually not be protecting you from anything other than growth, right? So it's a little bit tricky,
Yeah.
right? So, and the example that we had earlier was like the person who wants to find a relationship but refuses to leave their house or date anybody or anything like that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's very clear protective mechanism working the way it should. What do you think's the solution there?
I don't know. What's coming up for me is like letting go and forgiving yourself
Yeah,
first. Like really looking at it and being like, okay, how am I benefiting from this? And am I really benefiting from this? And then, doing some forgiveness work around that, I think, and just letting go of like that self image.
yeah,
Um, I know that sounds very like abstract and like chunked up, I guess you could
yeah.
say. Um, but I think that, just maybe do some research around letting go and forgiveness work. Or this could also be shadow work too, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like really doing some dark night of the soul. Is that what they call it? Like deep
That is,
diving
yeah.
into like your insecurities and being like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen if I put myself out there? Am I going to die? No. Am I going to lose everything? No. Chances are no. Like, and then go to, well, what if I do go out and I do meet someone and it's amazing and turns into this amazing thing, right? So, like, flipping your mindset to possibilities, flipping your mindset to what if thinking is going to also be really helpful.
What if thinking, yeah, um, is good. Yeah, directing your mind to positive potentials rather than scary worst case scenarios is
Yeah.
going to be very important. I think with this one, with the emotional benefit or secondary gain, awareness is going to be very, very key. So if a person is feeling stuck and they're listening to us right now and they're thinking, oh yeah, maybe there is something that like I'm avoiding or some fear, or something like that. A question that you can ask yourself is like, what good thing is going to go away when I take action towards my goal?
Mm-hmm.
Which initially might sound a little bit counterintuitive. Um, what good thing is going to go away? Like the person who, the classic example is the person who's too depressed to work, right? And they're seeking treatment, all stuff that should work, but the sadness or the depressive feelings are not going away. And they ask themselves, well, what good thing is going to go away when the problem, which is depression, goes away? I'll have to go back to work. I won't be able to stay home and relax and do my own thing all day, every day. I'll have to go back to the job that I hate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very hyper specific example, and it's
Yeah.
not uncommon, right? Same thing with the person who's afraid to date. What good thing is going to go away if I go out and seek a partner? Well, right now I'm super safe from rejection. That's going to go away if I
Yeah.
go out and often just that awareness, because then you get to make the informed choice. Well, now it's no longer an unconscious limitation. Now it's a choice. Am I going to choose to stay home and be safe from rejection, or am I going to choose to take that risk and go out and enter the dating world? Am I going to choose to, remain on the sofa, or am I going to take action to find a different job that I don't hate so much that I refuse to go back to it, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
It's about bringing it into awareness so you reclaim the power that is conscious choice rather than your unconscious mind enforcing these protective mechanisms. Thoughts
Yeah,
on
and
that?
the other thing that I think in that scenario too is like it might feel scary to do that big leap. So like what are some small things you can do in
Yeah.
the rejection situation? How can you get rejected like a mini rejection? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can combine the remedy from overwhelm with with the remedy for emotional benefit or secondary gain, and yeah, and have gradual exposure to that with which our subconscious mind was trying to protect us.
Yeah, because like the more the more wins you have in that area where you do a thing where you thought you might get rejected, but then you didn't, that's confirmation for your subconscious mind that, oh, it's actually okay if I do put myself out there just a little bit. So then that's going to be, opportunity for you to then put yourself out there a little bit more and then a little bit more and a little bit more until all of a sudden you're like on Tinder or whatever,
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
swiped.
yeah, cleaning up a storm. Cool. All right, so we got those. The obvious remedy for if you fall into any of the dehalt ones is if you're dehydrated,
Yeah,
hydrate,
key.
be rested. These are really, really, really important. Um, don't allow
That's how I
yourself
got
to,
onto the water cocktails after
that's how you
learning
get on them.
dehalt.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good. It's very important. It's very important. Those things sneak up on you, and really do affect your mental health, especially over time. So good. Okay. So I guess we got it. We
I
talked
think we
about
got
this
it.
stuckness epidemic, talked about what's causing it. We talked about some ways to overcome it. Um, Another great way to overcome it is to reach out to Alanna Banks, work with Alanna Banks, hypnotist and coach extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Alanna, what do you got going on these days? What's coming up?
Well, speaking of, I have a self image workshop coming up. So if you are feeling stuck, if you are the self image of any of those ones I was talking about, then this is going to be an opportunity to flip your self image and go to something that's a bit more positive and empowering and in alignment with your head and your heart. um, but that's kicking off November 15th. They're recorded modules, so you don't have to be live or anything like that, but you can go to my Instagram at Alanna Banks Coaching to get more information and sign up.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely check that out with Alanna Banks. I've always got training programs going on, both in hypnotherapy certification and my longer elite coach mentorship program, and lots of other good stuff going on. Depending on when you're listening to this, check me out, Ryan Montes NLP on the Instagram. And you are, what's your Instagram, Alanna?
Alanna Banks Coaching.
Right. Cool. I guess that's going to be it for today. Anything else to add?
No, that's it. Great
Sweet.
convo.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. That's going to be it. Bye.
Bye.